News can be so depressing, but I would call your attention to the pictures of the crowds in Egypt or Asia or Africa or even here. Some of those crowds are all male. Some of them have a smattering of women, often in veils and chadors. Others of them are predominantly women. Those crowds are a clue to the debate in that location about the status of women. All over the world, the silent revolution that is taking place is the expansion of the choices that women have to control their own destinies and the condition and quality of life for their families. I leave it to the pundits to debate the cause, whether it's the information revolution or changed expectations or a generational shift. The reality is that the world is witnessing a change in the way that women relate to it. Whether it is in India, look at the crowds there protesting rape, or Egypt or Turkey. Look at the crowds protesting the backward slipping social environment imposed by fundamentalist regimes. Or even in Texas, where finally the people who don't want goofy politicians poised between a woman and her physicians have decided to stand up for choice. Wherever in the world an issue of culture touches on the role of women, we can see visible evidence of change. Look at the faces in the crowd. They will tell you where women's interests are. Now, government is supposed to be a favorite alternative to the mob, democratic government, and so real democracies rely on the electoral process to give voice to the concerns of the people who are governed. We all know that even in the beginning, the founding fathers had concerns about that, and so blacks, Native Americans, poor people, and women couldn't vote. But over time, the franchise was extended to these to participate in voting for their government. This did not mean, however, that all these groups achieved parity in representation. When I was elected to the Senate in 1992, it marked the first, and so far the only, unfortunately, the first time a woman of color or Native American had actually had a vote in that chamber. What was most important about that breakthrough, what the press called the Year of the Woman, was that it elevated expectations, particularly among these beautiful young women, that women could speak for themselves, and that decision-making about the issues was no longer the exclusive prerogative of wealthy white men. The time had come for them to share the power. According to Paula Zantafulu's book, which I hope I'll recommend to you, I hope you can find it, in 1992, women surpassed the 10% mark in congressional representation with a net gain of 19 seats in the House of Representatives and 6 seats in the Senate. 8 election cycles later, in 2008, women topped off at 16.8%, or less than a 1% gain per election, actually 0.75% gain per election. By the 2010 elections, that number had slipped backwards to 16.6%. As much the point, at least 20 states have no women elected to the National Congress, and some have never had anyone other than white males elected. Now, before I go further, let me say without reservation, we can speak for ourselves. That is not to say that it's not a good thing to have sympathetic men supporting our positions on the issues. Ours, again, is an inclusive and collaborative movement. But the truth is that women actually do have life experiences and concerns that deserve to have a voice in government, whether it is about abortion rights or retirement security, military decisions, or economic opportunity. I could never get my head around how someone for whom it was physically impossible to be pregnant could be an expert on abortion or rape for that matter. Particularly when the opportunity existed to call upon the life experiences of people who had borne the physical impacts of pregnancy, or who had experienced the life-changing expectancy, or who had their very life threatened by their own body. Why would any sensible person forego the chance to refer to people who knew firsthand? Of course, the same argument applies to people who are poor, who better to understand the impacts of poverty, or people of diverse sexuality, who better to understand the civil rights implication of marriage equality? The list goes on and on. So in the interest of perfecting our democracy and making our diversity work for us, opening up freedom's gate to equal opportunity, equal representation rather, is an American imperative. Just as we support our sisters around the world who are agitating today for what we have won in the past, girls here don't get assassinated for advocating education. So we must work for equality of representation here, so as to take our country to a future in which women and men, black and white and brown, rich and poor, can contribute to the well-being of us all. As the suffragist Mary Church Terrell said over 100 years ago, and I quote her, "The injustice involved in denying women the suffrage is not confined to the disenfranchised sex alone, but extends to the nation as a whole, in that it is deprived of the excellent service which women might render." We want to save our country from that deprivation, to serve the common good, and to help make America the model for democracies all over the world by working for equality of representation here at home. We have suggested in the past that to make it easier for men to power share, that the established political parties, Republicans as well as Democrats, adopt as official policy in their national platforms an every open seat, a woman's seat plank. That will mean that for every seat vacated by a man in the Congress, Senate, and House, the parties themselves will promote, support, finance, and work for the election of a woman candidate. So far, we have gotten lip service, particularly and unfortunately from some of the female party insiders. For whatever reasons they might have as apologists or enablers or just folks more interested in their own careers, the response has been patronizing at best. But given the rate of progress, or rather the lack of it, it is high time the excuses stop and the parties we support start supporting us. Had women won just half of the open seats in the past 4 congressional election cycles, over a quarter of the Congress would be female. Without party support, however, the snail's pace of reform will not speed up, and we will continue to struggle to achieve our fair share of representative seats. In the 2012 elections, with redistricting and 54 open seats, women won, ready, 1.7% of the election contest, or 15 people. The suffragists 100 years ago called for, quote, deeds, not words, in connection with the franchise. We have to do as much to make the parties accountable to us now. Go talk to the women who lost their election attempts in the last 4 cycles. Ask them how much actual party support and, importantly, money they received from their party. Unless the parties step up, we will not achieve anything like parity of representation until the next millennium. Now, when I was growing up, the old folks used to talk about tree shakers and jelly makers. The tree shakers are the people who agitate for change. They make the fruit fall. They make it available for consumption. They make the impossible possible. Without them, there is no change because their effort creates the basis for change. The jelly makers, by contrast, benefit from the tree shakers' work. They take the fruit that has been made available to them and then transform it. They reap what has been sown. They are agents of change too, but they rarely, if ever, take on the task of agitation or the burden of opposition to the status quo. The jelly makers are finishers of the work that the tree shakers start. Clearly, both roles are needed for change to happen. There have to be starters, but there have to be finishers too. And it is obvious, however, that the finishers can only work with what they have been provided. They follow a vision, they don't create it. The tree shakers are the true cultural creatives. They are the ones that shape the direction for the rest of the world to respond to. They have the courage to challenge the status quo. I am most proud of my association with NOW because of the clarity of vision that this organization has consistently shown. And I want to take a moment to congratulate Terry and Bonnie and Chitra and the team who worked to keep this organization going. When other organizations temporized or embraced the safe or popular position, or worse yet, fell in line with what they thought was expected of them, now took up the cause of our liberation with consistency and courage. When choice for poor women was sacrificed on the altar of appeasement to anti-abortion forces, now did not hesitate to speak up for those sisters whose poverty made their voices inaudible. When civil rights for gay women were denied by the very people who should have known better, now insisted that there were no closets in Freedom's house. When women dared to enter the ferocious arena of political action, now stood with them. It has taken courage and vision and more than a little faith to stay the course to core principles that bring us together as members and supporters of this organization. The world needs you to continue to shake the tree. There are so many arenas in which you can work, and I know we're talking about them during this conference. There is enough to do that everyone can choose the interest that matters to them most. But let me to encourage you to choose every open seat a woman's seat, and urge you to strategize how to move the local and national parties to adopt that position. Proselytizing about the importance of women's representation, and make your party, local and national, actually prove to you that they are serious about equality. When you do, your work to elect women will be leveraged by the vast resources and networks that the political elite enjoy, and we will move toward a real democracy. Carry the torch that inspired Now's creation and that has never gone out. The people of the world will thank you for it. And I thank you for an opportunity to say more than a few words today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, well, it's now my pleasure, and I'm going to get my cheat sheet over here. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ellie Smeal. Now, my first memory of Ellie, and I know she can tell this story probably as well as I can. I tell it every chance I get. Sitting on the floor of my apartment in Springfield, Illinois, after she had come in to agitate and to work for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. And unfortunately, you know, Phyllis Schlafly and that crowd and all the money and all the goofiness got us, and Illinois did not ratify. Next time, however, we're going to get this together. But Ellie has been a fighter in the trenches for a very long time, when we're the same age. But she's been out there taking the knocks, doing the work. She served 3 terms as the now president and has been working on the front lines of this movement for over 40 years, local and nationally. And her victories include integration of the Little League and ratification of landmark legislation, including the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the Equal Credit Act, the Violence Against Women Act, and the Civil Rights Act of 1991. Ellie has worked tirelessly on countless campaigns and is credited with leading the largest nationwide grassroots and lobbying campaign in the history of the modern women's movement, a campaign dedicated to ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment. She is the founder and president of the Feminist Majority Foundation, which was the first organization to point out and decry and hold up for everybody's examination the Taliban's treatment toward women in Afghanistan. Ellie is a staunch supporter of Social Security equity, of abortion rights, and the involvement of young women in the feminist movement. And I want to point out particularly her work on the college campuses. She's been going around the country helping to give our message to young women who might otherwise hear just one side of the conversation. And so we have relied on Ellie and her outreach to keep the young women bringing the vitality and youth and energy that they have into this movement. So with that, I want to introduce Ellie Smeal with all the love I can possibly give.
Thank you, Carol. And that story is not only true on the Equal Rights Amendment. You forgot the year, but it's many years ago. And we've been working ever since, together, conspiring in every way that we can. Our assignment today, and I'm going to go really fast because I asked Terry, what do you want us to do here? Well, she wanted us in 5 minutes, which is terrible because I'm not known for being a short speaker. But anyway, in 5 minutes to say what we have to do and where we're going. Okay, fine, no problem. So anyway, I'll try to stay in that spirit, and I'm going to talk a little fast because I think there's so much to do, and even though we're in the midst of a massive backlash, not only here in the United States, but worldwide, trying to put women back into a box. But we're not only fighting back, I view it as the last gasp of a patriarchy whose days are numbered. So we have to keep not only fighting the patriarchy's attempt to take away reproductive rights in this country, but also worldwide to take away all humanity for women, as the Taliban, and I will not forget what they're doing. They just blew up, if you haven't been watching that, in Pakistan, outside of Quetta, a medical bus, a women's medical school bus, of medical students, women students. And as they were going to the hospital to work, they blew up the bus. Then they went to the hospital's emergency room as the victims were being taken in and blew it up too. These real courage. Feminists are fighting and fighting, and I want you to know in Afghanistan that movement for women's rights is well and strong, and don't ever forget the women that are on the front lines fighting for the freedom of all of us. And there's much progress, many women's groups, so don't believe the language that we're not going anyplace. Everywhere the spirit of feminism is growing, and we just have to help nourish it in every way we can. Here in the United States, this is what I think we have to do. Democratic leader Pelosi, who I think will be the Speaker of the House again, is introducing in late July, and we'll all be there. I know that Terry will be there, I'll be there, the women's economic agenda, because we are not going to just fight for reproductive rights. We're going to fight for closing the wage gap. Paid sick days, paid family medical leave, and child care for all. And we're not only going to close the wage gap, we're going to raise the minimum wage and also raise the minimum wage for servers of our food, all the tip earners. Between now and October 1, all of us have got to fight for the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. From October 1 to March 31st, we must register 7 million people into affordable care. And let's not forget, it means no discrimination against women. It is a Title IX for women, and we are going to make sure that we as validators tell people what it means and why they need to register for insurance care and to expand Medicaid. And I believe now that the feminist majority in each women's group has a role to play to make sure that all get insurance coverage, and that, maternity care and birth control without co-pays and deductibles, cancer screenings, that people know their rights. Go on to the site, be spokespeople, because the Republicans think we're not going to get our act together, and they're going to still destroy what has been a dream, that health care is a basic human right. Now, as we do all this, we need you in Virginia and New Jersey. And if you're not there, please take some time to go. We have to defeat Cuccinelli and this awful right-wing Republican ticket in Virginia that wants to take away all reproductive rights from women. We can beat them, and we have endorsed, now has, Feminist Majority has, every women's group, Terry McAuliffe, and a team of people who understand that we're living in the 21st century. We can't give up on Barbara Buono in New Jersey. We got to elect her. And we have to reframe all the debates. Can't let the Republicans control the debates and talk about deficits. We're living in the richest economy in the world, and we've got to talk about revenues. And we've got to make sure that we don't forget the poor, that we don't let them privatize public education. And in all this, we've got to raise the banner for the Equal Rights Amendment and seat us so high that no politician dare take a stand without talking about equality for women and making it real again. We have much to do. We have much to do. We can't be tired, and I think we can't be discouraged. We must know, and I want you all to say it, we are the majority. We together will not be defeated. And this time when we go forth for equality, we go as one united. Rich and poor. All races. Gay and straight, bisexual and trans, all inclusive. We are the majority. And we will win.
Boy, Ellie does red meat better than anybody. That's fabulous. Thank you, Ellie. All right, it's now my privilege to introduce our State Representative, Linda Lawson. Linda was the first female captain of the Hammond Police Department, working with the Domestic Violence and Sex Crimes Department, a division, and which of course just ignited her passion and knowledge and interest in helping the victims. Linda has served on the board of Haven House, which is a women's shelter in Lake County, Indiana, and she served at the board on the Boys and Girls Club, the Humane Society of the Calumet area, and the League of Women Voters. Since 1998, Linda's represented Indiana House District 1. She served as chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and along with being with and a number of other legislative committees. Currently, she is a member of the Statutory Committee on Ethics, Judiciary Committee, the Public Policy, and Select Committee on Government Reduction. In 2012, Linda was elected Indiana House Democratic Floor Leader. Congratulations. Where she has continued to work on crucial pieces of domestic violence legislation and other. So thank you. Let us give a warm welcome to Linda Lawson, Floor Leader of the Indiana Legislature.
Thank you, everyone. I don't even know how to top that. I don't have any idea what to say. I think I should just get down and walk out of here and we just all get busy. All right, where do I begin? I was told that I should tell you my story, and that I would kind of tell you where I'm at right now and how I stayed involved in the issues that I have. Since we have 5 to 7 minutes, there's going to be a lot of gaps, in the last 44 years that I've been involved in these kinds of things. And I'm going to take you back to when I was 20, when I got married. and by the time I was 23, I had 2 daughters. And when I was 24, I was divorced. And when I was 25, I was a student at Indiana University in Gary at the Northwest Indiana campus. And then I started hanging out with a friend of mine that I had not seen for a very long time. We kind of accidentally ran into each other bugging our children down the street. And she said, you need to come join me and my friends on a Sunday night because we're all getting together and we're just kind of reading stuff like Robin Morgan and Sylvia Plath and Doris Lessing. And we were really entrenched in the kinds of things that were happening in the early 70s. Very, very entrenched. Some of you might remember those consciousness raising groups that we all did. See, I knew I was in a good crowd. Anyway, to make a long story short, what happened is I started applying for non-traditional jobs because I knew that I couldn't support my girls because I was not a secretary, I was not a hairdresser, I was not a teacher, and I didn't have any of those skills. Oh, a nurse. I couldn't be a nurse either. So I knew I had to start looking for a non-traditional job that would support my family, and I had the encouragement of fabulous, incredibly cool, bright, energetic, and committed women who encouraged me to go in the direction that I did. I applied for a job in the Hammond Police Department, and to this day, I cannot believe I did it. I was a full-time art student. Go figure, go figure. So, as it turns out, I'm just going to take you now. I'm 26 years old, and I go into our personnel and training for the first time. And before I go 1 minute further, my chief of staff, not mine's and Sue's, both, is in the hallway looking at me right now. And my legislative assistant is right here. And I must say to you, as a legislator, I could not do it without them. I could not do it without healthy, strong people that I surround myself with, and I love these 2 dearly. Anyway, I'm now applied for this job. I'm in personnel and training, and I'm the only female in the room taking a test with a group of men. Some of the things that they said were, the men's bathroom is down the hallway. You can go downstairs, get a snack, pop machines there, and the ladies' room is across the hallway. So from then on, it was downhill. I generally don't take orders really well, and I don't like being told what to do. I've got that kind of a personality. And what happened is, we take those tests, and you got to fill out those little squares, and you've got to take this test, and then they take the template, and they take it over and put it over the top and say how many you got right, how many you got wrong. And I was told repeatedly when I started taking the test, you've got to finish the test. Just guess. You don't have to, get them all right, but you just absolutely have to guess. But you have to get them all done. So I've been married a whole bunch of times. And my last initial to my name at the time was a W. So I was like the last person in the room to get my test scored. And of course, the lieutenant that was in there goes, just like a woman. Never follows instructions, just never follows instructions. But it turned out I scored higher than anybody else in the room. Now things get real crazy because now he says, your test score is high, but you have to be 5'9" and 185 pounds to work here. So I filed my first lawsuit against height and weight. Now after that, I was able to come in, take the test again. I had to go before the pension board for a bunch of stuff. I was the first person in the history of the Hammond Police Department to take a physical agility test. I will tell you, I went before the pension board, and a man one of the questions they asked me, you'll appreciate this, is what kind of birth control I was using. I did ask them at the time, why is that so important? Do you ask everybody? And they said, no, only you, because if you get pregnant, we're gonna have to give you time off. They don't have to get time off. So we have to ask you those questions. A man that ended up being my partner was a very sexy, good-looking gentleman, still is, although he's 73. He's a real hottie. And he wore those great bottom pants, you know, with leather boots up, and he was in the room dressed like that. He looked like the guy in YMCA, those guys, you know. He had mirrored sunglasses on. I'm not making this up. This is absolutely true. And he takes his gun belt off and he lays it across his little finger and he says to me, "How heavy do you think this is?" And I said, "I don't know, 20, 21 pounds. It's something like that." But he said, "Yeah, you know, you're right. You're right." Sits back down. He goes, "But do you think you can do this every day?" And I said, "I don't know, but I don't think it's as bad as carrying a baby for 9 months." We became great friends, and we were partners for 6 years. I'm going to take you a little bit further. We still don't have any promotional procedure on our Hammond Police Department. And there was an African American and a Mexican male, both of them, that had filed a lawsuit with the EOC very later on in my career. And they won that lawsuit and got promotions, but not, I got them. My 20th year in the police department, I got my lieutenancy, my sergeancy, my lieutenancy, and my captaincy, all within 1 year. And believe me, it was because of the lawsuit that Pete had filed, you know, and that's how it happened. They still don't have a promotional procedure. At the Hammond Department right now, we don't have any women, not one woman, in a position of authority, not one. This is the serious part. While I was taken out for lunch by our first African-American officer on the department, and he said to me, "Linda, you need to quit the department. You need to quit right now." And I said, "Oh man, I've worked so hard. You know, this has taken me all these years. It's really difficult, you know, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "It's never going to change for you. It's never going to change for me, and it's never going to change for you." And it never did, by the way. He told me, he said, "If you decide to stay, you must prepare yourself. You absolutely, it's your 20th year, you need to be out of here doing something else. But you need to really consider what you're doing right now." Well, I stayed. He became a pilot, and on his 20th day, he went to work for Air Canada and moved his family to Toronto. But I knew in life, as people, every person in this room, we need 3 things. We need this. We need a sense of affection, we need a sense of belonging, and we need a sense of recognition for the things that we've done well. And it used to be that only men got that from their job, and they got that fulfillment from their job, and women got theirs from cleaning the house and doing those kind of things, I guess. I don't know. It never was fun for me. It still isn't. But I mean, no one was nice to me. They would not, you know, even if a man came in the door and his arms were completely burdened with stuff that he had, property that he had gotten from a burglary or whatever, he would stand there and I would hold the door and they would just stand there and look at me, not say anything. And I said, you can go on, can I help you? And I wouldn't say anything, not even recognize that I was standing there next to him. I would walk through the door would shut, and I would struggle to get the door open. I mean, they put dildos in my briefcase. They put condoms and Tampax in the squad car. I was a single mom, had 2 little girls at home. Our local newspaper ran an article about how do you feel, asked 12 officers' wives how they felt about me working with their husbands on afternoons and midnights. Not days, not days. No, I was in the back seat taking that goddamn buckle off and pulling my pants down and trying to have sex with their husbands while we were waiting to have a call. That's what I was doing. It was the craziest thing that you have ever heard of in your life, and it was constant. And I had no recourse. I kept my Tampax in one sock, and I kept my cigarettes and my lighter in my other sock. I mean, I had no one to learn from. There were a few Chicago female officers that I knew because they had had officers, since the early 20s. I will tell you this, they still had to wear high heels, though, until 1964. Think about that. But anyway, I went to the community. And they embraced me. Remember, people don't care what you know until they know you care. And I went to that community, and whether it was the League of Women Voters or the PTA, I talked to them about child sexual assault. I talked to them about rape prevention. I went out and I talked to people about how to take care of your house and your home and your family. And I did it on my own time, way before there was Crime Watch and that kind of stuff. I was out in the community and they embraced me. And I love my community so much. I owe them so much because they did everything for me. And now I'm a state legislator. Thank you. And again, there are so many gaps in this 44 years that I'm talking about. So many gaps. But I'm telling you that to win an election and to see your name on the wall, and you know what that's like, all four of you, seeing your name there and the responsibility of those 70,000 people that are back in Hammond, Indiana, and in Whiting, Indiana, that count on me and my legislative assistant and our chief of staff to answer those phones, to help with their needs, to help what they want, is the most fulfilling thing that you could possibly imagine. I would never, ever, ever be where I'm at today if it weren't for the strong women that I have kept in my life. There's a woman over here who works for CWA. She will attest to this. I surround myself, even to this day, with the strongest possible women of valor that I can find. And I draw strength from them on a daily basis. I love them. They're part of my life. When I meet youngsters and women that I hope to be where I'm at one day, good God, I don't want to do this much longer. I spent 12 years on a school board. I spent 25 years on a police department, and now I've been here 15 years. Good God, that's like 50 years of public service. I want out. I want to plant a garden and play with my dogs, although I bring them everywhere I go. I just pull the dog hair out of my mouth. But I've got to tell you, those college professors I had, I can tell you their first names, their last names, their partners' names. I can tell you the things that they told me and the strength that they gave me. The women that I've surrounded myself with today, my very best friends, Sue and I served together, and we just walked in here hugging each other saying, I love you. Because look at the power in this room. And the one thing that I heard is mentoring is the most important thing that every woman in this room can do. Because I want to leave, and I want you all to leave, and I want us to grow up one day, never to stop what we're doing, but reach out to young women. Absolutely reach out. I mean, it's the most important thing we can do. We have an army of women in this country that can take it by storm if the women in this room tell 10 people, and they tell 10 people, and they tell 10 people. So I thank the women in my life. I thank the people that have helped me. The Indiana General Assembly is totally screwed up. I could use all kinds of words if you wanted to hear right now. We have to live every day with Mike Pence. Oh, Jesus. Anyway. He is a clown, if there ever was a clown. You have no idea. Recently, when Doma passed, he went on his website and made sure that his staff deleted every negative message because he doesn't want those on his website. And then promptly apologized to everybody in the United States because he's so stupid. The problem is he's a stupid, dangerous man, and we have a supermajority in the House and the Senate. And we have fought and struggled for the last 3 years. It's been absolutely a nightmare. The year before last, I literally, in the middle of session, almost just threw the towel in and went home. Being 63 years old and crying yourself to sleep is just not a good way to live. The social issues, it's their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They thrive on it. They thrive on it. And the kinds of things they're doing in Indiana is absolutely, positively insane. So stay strong, love on each other. You are by far the coolest people in the whole state of Illinois right now. Thank you.
All right, well, now the other part of the Indiana dynamic duo, we'll hear from Sue Errington. Sue has been an advocate for social justice for her entire career, and she's got a long list of accomplishments to show it. She was the public policy director of Planned Parenthood of Indiana for 17 years. She served 4 years as Indiana State Senator while contributing to the Senate's Health and Provider Services Committee, Education and Career Development Committees. Sue is also a current delegate for the Women in Government, to Women in Government, a national bipartisan organization of women state legislators. She is a recipient of the 2008 Ball State University Women of Achievement Award for Distinction in Public Advocacy. Sue currently serves as the ranking Democrat on the Senate's Health and Provider Services Committee. She describes her most critical priorities as creating good-paying green jobs, providing educational excellence for our children, and making health care more accessible and affordable for all. Welcome, Sue Errington.
Well, we've had 3 of the most dynamic speakers you could have, and now there's me. So I'm going to try to live up to that myself. I am so glad to be back in front of an audience because my topic was to talk about what led me to the place I'm at in the Indiana General Assembly, which is the House of Representatives. And it all starts with now. I would never have had the insights, the experience, or the skills to even consider running for office if it hadn't been for my years in now. I got started in, I think it was 1972. And one of the first things that my NOW chapter did after I joined was go off to the State House for a hearing on the Equal Rights Amendment. This was the very first time I had ever been in the Indiana State House. And when I got there and listened to the hearings and thought, oh, this is a piece of cake, we're going to win this. Well, they voted us down that year. And so then later there was an ERA rally that, again, I was a NOW member, I went to this, and I heard State Senator Louis Mahern tell us, sometimes it's easier to change legislators than it is to change a legislator's vote. And there were a bunch of us from Indiana now that heard that, and that's when we became involved in the electoral system. We had some members that were really good at analyzing vote records, and we questioned candidates and talked with people like our chief of staff out there who knew who was running and who wasn't, and we picked out people that we wanted to support. I think at the time they were all men, but there was one woman, Marion, okay, she's got a better memory than I do. But anyway, that was when I and many other Indiana Now members got involved in political campaigns. And you know what? We got enough of them elected that the next year, and I know Ellie was there, Alice Cohan came in, and Phyllis Weatherby, I saw her here earlier. And maybe there are some others that came into Indiana, and we ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. So, having gotten my foot in the door working for those candidates, I just kept right on working for other candidates that I thought would help in the cause of women's rights. Then we had a situation in my county where we had 3 open seats on the county council. And like Ambassador Braun said, those are good seats to go after. So I started talking to every woman friend I had, because we had no women on the county council, saying, won't you run? Won't you run? Every one of them turned me down. The last one who turned me down looked at me and said, Sue, why don't you run? And you know what? That's the first time anybody had said that to me, and it clicked. And I thought, well, if nobody else is going to run, we got to get one of those seats. And so I started asking my friends, and sitting right over here is one of my best and longest friends, Victoria Rose, my political guru in Muncie, and talked to my husband. They all said, yes, you should run. So I did, and I won. Now, I have run for office 5 times. I've won 3 of those times. Each one of those times was an open seat. So if any of you have any thoughts of running, keep an eye on those open seats, because those are golden. When I was elected to the Senate, I served for 4 years, and I ran for re-election, and I lost that. That was 2 years ago. It was a real blow to my ego, because I thought I was going to win. But it turns out it was a Republican year, and they're very good. They had a template of things to use against people, Democrats across the country. I know we saw it in Congress, some of those same things. You would have thought I had been in Washington voting for the Affordable Care Act, because that was one of the things they used against me. But the other thing I noticed in those 2 elections that I lost is that my opponent raised more money than I did. So I want to tell you, any help you give to a candidate, we need volunteers, but we also have to have money, because those are the radio commercials, the TV commercials, the direct mail, things that you need in addition to the troops on the ground that are knocking on the doors. So if I leave anything else with you, is money is important along with people power. Now, a couple of other things I want to say before I sit down for my extended 5 minutes is that, like Linda, I'm not going to be here forever. And so I'm looking for someone to take my place. And I think you need to start looking early, because you really want to have somebody that, shares your values and can win. So I'm hoping that some of you out there, you're all now members, you're getting those skills, you're learning what to do, you're learning to ask for money for one cause or another. Those are transferable into a political campaign. The other thing that I want to leave with you is, even though it's not someone who would replace me, I had this great experience of another person who used to live in Indiana, now lives in New Hampshire. She decided to run for the New Hampshire primary, and she won. The New Hampshire legislature, I mean. And at the beginning of her campaign, she and her partner were in Indiana. And they stopped by to see me. So Victoria and I sat down at my kitchen table, and we shared our insights into running, including giving her a slogan, "Mary for Dairy." And campaigns in New Hampshire are a lot different from Indiana, I think, because she was saying theirs only costs maybe $1,000, and we just about choked over that. Because in Indiana, a really contested campaign is, could be $500,000. So anyway, we encouraged her to raise her sights. So I'm sure she outraised everybody that ran against her. So I'm going to sit down, and I hope you have lots of questions for us, because I'm sure we'd all like to say more.
All right. Thanks, Sue. Well, I take a special pride in making this next introduction of Toni Preckwinkle. Toni, we're sitting here reading, and I'm going to go through her accomplishments in a minute, but I didn't realize that we've actually known each other for over 20 years. Toni ran for alderman 19 years ago, right? No, she served as alderman for 19 years of the 4th Ward. And I was in the state legislature at the time, and I knocked on doors for Toni back in those days. I didn't realize it had been that long. To you young women, time goes so fast. You just have no idea how quickly when you look back and somebody says, "Oh, it's 25 years." It's like, what? Yesterday. Okay. Anyway, Toni Preckwinkle, I'm so proud of Toni Preckwinkle. She is the Cook County Board President. And let me put that in context. Cook County has 5.3 million people, and Toni presides, and I do mean presides because this has always been a very strong executive kind of an office, presides over a $2.9 billion budget. She is in charge of our criminal justice system, which means the court system, our health care. Cook County Hospital, it comes under her jurisdiction and authority, housing, Cook County Housing, as well as our forest preserves and a plethora of other engagements. So this is a very, very powerful woman. Within the 2 years of her election as Cook County Board President in 2012, she was able to eliminate more than $100 billion in deficits, eliminated waste, she improved efficiency, she brought in new revenues to Cook County. She even, in the process, oversaw the rollback of a very unpopular sales tax hike, which saved the residents of this county more than $440 million and brought relief to businesses and working families. There was a time when we had the highest county tax here in Illinois in the country. She won federal approval of a Medicaid waiver that allowed for more than 100,000 low-income residents to register in the health system, which of course ensured access to an awful lot of people that would not have otherwise had health care. Again, she, before that, was alderman of the 4th Ward for 19 years and has been a fighter and crusader for justice, social justice, economic justice, fairness, and for openness and accountability in government. She is a beacon for ethical government and a hard worker, and she has been, for that reason, won the IVI IPO's Best Alderman Best Award on multiple occasions. So Toni Preckwinkle is a powerhouse. I'm going to stop talking and give her a chance to do so, but I'm just so happy to see her here today and thank her for being with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you today. You know, I'm a history teacher by profession, and whenever I began my American history classes, I would always say that democracy is at the same time the best and the most fragile form of government on earth. The best and most fragile because it depends on an active, engaged citizenry. And I want to thank the National Organization for Women for its commitment to civic engagement. So I got involved in politics when I was 16 years old. My high school social studies teacher invited me to be involved in a campaign for Katie McWatt. She was running for city council in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I grew up. She was the first African-American woman to run for that office. And so I called folks on the telephone and got my friends and family to put out yard signs and stuffed envelopes and did all the things you do in a campaign. And unfortunately, we got to the eve of the election, and Katie McWatt didn't win. But I decided that I love politics, and when I came to Chicago to go to college, I worked in political campaigns in my neighborhood for many years. And actually, I am proud to say that I worked for Carol Mosley Braun when she ran for the State House of Representatives in 1978. So she served many years in the state legislature, and then in her kitchen, we talked about her run for Recorder of Deeds, countywide office, and then, of course, her run for the United States Senate. So I'm proud to have been a supporter of hers since 1978. So as I said, I'm a teacher by profession, and I've always said that being a teacher is great preparation for public life. If you can manage a classroom of teenagers, you can do just about anything, in my view. And you know that each class has its own personality, and your charge as a teacher is to try to explain complex issues in ways that your young people can understand. And when they're clearly not getting it, when it's not resonating, to figure out how to turn on a dime and explain things in a concise way that will reach them. So, and that's of course what you have to do in public life as an elected official. You have an obligation, I always say, not just to do the right thing, but to explain what you're doing, to engage people, to involve them, and to be sure that they have the best possible understanding of the course that you've tried to take. I was elected in 1991 to the position of Alderman of the 4th Ward, representing 60,000 people in Chicago. It was my third run for office. I ran in 1983 and I lost. I ran in 1987 and I lost. I won in 1991 by 109 votes out of 11,000 cast. And so when I talk to young people, I talk to them about the importance of being persistent, and I also talk to them about the importance of their vote. Because if, 100 more or less people had stayed home that day or not come out to vote for me, I never would have embarked on this amazing political career. So I'm very grateful to those 109 people, wherever they are, for their support. I decided after almost 20 years in office, having worked on community development and education, affordable housing, public safety, that I was looking for another challenge, and I decided I'd run for president of the county board. The incumbent was clearly not going to win re-election, and I knew that there was nobody else who had the same commitment that I did to providing health care for the uninsured and the underinsured, which was a third of the county's budget, or trying to be sure that our criminal justice system was both more fair and just. And that was 40% of our budget. 3/4 of the county's budget is public health and public safety. And it's been quite a roller coaster for the last 2.5 years, struggling in a difficult economic climate to balance our budget, trying to institute performance management. So it may not surprise some of you, but in Cook County we didn't have any performance management, so you couldn't. When I came in, I said, how much does it cost us to send out the tax bills? How much does it cost us to fill potholes? What does it cost us to deliver the services we're delivering? And of course, nobody could tell me. We also had government that had, very few of our departments had job descriptions or annual performance reviews or any of the things that people kind of take for granted in the private sector or in well-run government. So it's been quite a challenge. But let me talk a little bit about what I see as the challenges for women who are seeking elected office. The first, of course, is fundraising, and that's been alluded to by several of the previous speakers. And I often joke that if I had known in my 20s and 30s that I wanted to run for public office in my later 30s and 40s, I would have been an investment banker rather than a teacher, because then I would have not only had some money of my own, but I would have had a network of wealthy friends. For most women, we weren't investment bankers in our youth, and so we have to rely on our networks from the schools that our kids attend, or the park districts, or our churches, our synagogues. We have to rely on our sort of community-based and faith networks for the troops that will help us. And we don't have the kind of very wealthy friends that some, not all, but some of our male colleagues can turn to. You know, if you have a network of millionaires that you can call on for your financial support in your campaign, you're in a much better place than if you have to get that money through small donations. But the small donations are really helpful, and to have a broad base of support once you're elected is an incredible advantage. But fundraising is a big issue. When I declared my candidacy in 2008 for an office where the primary was in March of 2010, I'm sorry, in February of 2010, that first year we spent 20 hours a week at least making calls for money. I mean, that's what the dirty little secret of our democracy is: the higher up the food chain you go, the more time you have to spend making calls for money. It consumes an incredible amount of your time, unless you're independently wealthy. And of course, the other thing that's happening in our democracy is that more and more public officials are millionaires and billionaires, and that's not good. That's not good for our country. So raising money is surely one of the most important issues that we have to face. Let me just say too, in terms of encouraging women to run, we have to raise our girls differently, to be risk takers, and to be willing to fail, because you're not always going to win your election, as you heard. Lots of times good candidates don't win. Lots of times we work hard for very good people and they don't win. You have to be willing. You know, we are more, I think, if not encouraging, tolerant of boys taking risks. We have to be willing to support our girls as they take those risks as well. So fundraising is a big part of it, and unfortunately in this time and place we have to spend an incredible amount of time raising money if we want to be successful, because it's usually the person who raises the most money who wins. The other issue that we face as women is media representation. You know, when I was first elected to office as an alderman, you're a local elected official, you're kind of under the radar. But again, the higher up the food chain you go, the more attention is devoted to you and your family and everybody you've ever been associated with. And the tenor of the coverage has gotten, at least in my view, progressively more mean-spirited and voracious. You know, let me just point out that we have a First Lady of the United States who's a Harvard Law School graduate, and a lot of the coverage about her is about her haircut, her bangs, right? Yeah, oh yes, that's right, and the fact that she wears sleeveless dresses. As a woman who's an elected official, I get a lot of questions about balancing my professional and personal life. Now, you tell me, when was the last time you heard a man ask that question? How do you balance your professional and your personal life? You know, men they rarely comment on, you know, men's haircuts, their clothes, you know, none of that. But, you know, God bless Hillary Clinton, because she surely suffered a great deal from that kind of sexist coverage in the media, you know, about the length of her hair and you know, whether or not she was wearing makeup that day, and the pantsuits that she wore, as if they had anything to do with her competence, her ability to lead the country. So, I encourage young women all the time to get involved in campaigns. You don't have to even be 18 years old. which is of course the age for voting. But you can stuff envelopes, you can make phone calls, you can get people to put out yard signs, and frankly, that's the future of our country. We have to get our young people engaged in the political process and hopeful about the outcomes for the values that they believe in. So I'm very grateful to all of you for your time and attention today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, President Preckwinkle. I don't know how much time we have allocated for questions at this point. If there is time. Okay, who should I ask? All right, we're just going to go for it, and then you'll cut teeny bit. Okay, we obviously have to have some questions. So, okay, here you go. Money and the importance of fundraising.
It's got to kind of stay away from the camera shot.
I'm Carol King. I have a question about fundraising and campaign finance reform. I think one of the most important things we need to look at from a perspective of how our democracy works and what we're going to do to overcome Citizens United is look at campaign finance reform and also take a look again at term limits and the effect that's having on our democracy and the way that we now have civil servants and lobbyists writing bills because legislators don't have the experience anymore. And I wonder what you think we can do as feminists, as members of NOW, to help progress some of those kinds of ideas, as well as getting women elected to office.
Before that gets answered, there's a very important, Jennifer Byrne, are you here? Jennifer? Anybody know Jennifer? Okay, if you see Jennifer, tell her, Jennifer Byrne, to report to the registration desk and pick up her driver's license. Yeah, right, very serious. So I didn't, huh? We want her to be, well, it's her driver's license. So, all right, I apologize for interrupting your question there. Because who wants to take a stab at campaign finance reform as an issue?
Okay, I think the long-term goal is campaign finance reform. But let me just tell you, in the short term, in the indeterminate interval between now and the time we have campaign finance law reform, what women need to do is give more money to candidates they believe in. Because that's the name of the game. The name of the game is how much money you raise, and until such time as we can change the rules about fundraising, we have to play the game as it is. And that means contributing as much as we can to the candidates we believe in.
Oh, that's
Okay,
great.
great.
Okay, next question.
I'm Joanne Tosti-Vasey. I'm from the Mid-Atlantic region, and we have a wonderful panelists up here who have been elected to office. We also have here in the audience many people who have won, lost, and won. I'd like to give a shout out to those. So those of you who have ever thought of running, please stand up. Those of you who have run for a party position and either won or lost, stand up.
Don't sit down again, remain
Yes,
standing.
then you all remain standing. Those of you who have run for local offices, whether you have won or lost, please stand up. I'm doing that one next. Those of you who have run for state office, including judicial offices, and for those states that have it, please stand up. And those who have run for Congress or for state, for the House of Representatives, we know we have Carol Mosley Braun. Who else in the room? Well, thank you all. You all know who here in the room now you can come talk to, even if you can't talk to the panelists on the stage.
All right, thank you. That was